Chapter 4. Important Lessons. The next morning, Marie Grace was so nervous that she could barely swallow the porridge Mrs. Curtis had made. Before she left home, Marie Grace gave Argos a long hug. "I'll miss you when I'm at school," she whispered to him, "but I'll be back this afternoon, and I'll tell you all about it." It was raining, so Papa held an umbrella over her as they walked together to St. Teresa's. "I think you'll like this school, Marie Grace," he said, "and I'm sure you'll make friends here, too." Marie Grace hoped with all her heart that her father was right. She thought of how nice Cecile had been at the French market, but she also remembered her encounter with Lavinia Halsworth. What will the girls at St. Teresa's be like, Marie Grace wondered. Her father walked her through the school's iron gate and up to the wide front door. A freckled young nun welcomed them to the school. Marie Grace's mouth felt dry as she said goodbye to her father. She followed the nun down a wood-paneled hall that smelled of chalk dust. The nun stopped at the last door. "You'll be here, in Sister Pauline's class," she announced. Marie Grace stepped into the classroom as quietly as she could. A tall nun with spectacles was standing at the front of the room, lecturing to the class. 3 rows of girls sat facing the teacher. All of the students turned around when the door closed behind Marie Grace. As the girls stared at her, Marie Grace felt the blood rush to her face. Suddenly, she realized 2 awful facts. First, Sister Pauline was lecturing in French. Even worse, Lavinia Halsworth was sitting in the front row. The first few moments passed in a blur. Sister Pauline rapped on her desk. Then she looked straight at Marie Grace and asked her a question in French. The room was silent. Marie Grace sensed that everyone was waiting for her to reply, but her mind was blank. It was bad enough not to know the answer to a teacher's question. She didn't even know what the question was. All she could think of to say was the French word for yes. "Oui?" she said hopefully. As soon as the word was out of her mouth, Marie Grace heard ripples of laughter. She knew that she had given the wrong answer, and she wished she could run out the door, back to Papa. Sister Pauline rapped again on her desk, and the laughter stopped. Then she asked in English, "What is your name, please?" Marie Grace felt her blush deepen as she realized that was the question Sister Pauline had asked her the first time. She mumbled her name, and Sister Pauline smiled at her kindly. "Take a seat, Marie Grace," the nun directed, "and follow along as best you can." As the other girls turned to face the front of the room, Marie Grace looked for a place to sit. The only empty seat was in the middle row, at a double desk next to a skinny girl with curly brown hair. Marie Grace quickly slid in next to the girl. "We're on this page," murmured the girl, tilting her book so that Marie Grace could see it. When Marie Grace glanced down at the page, she felt her stomach flip-flop. It was all written in French. Lavinia whispered something to a girl with red hair. When the girl burst into giggles, Sister Pauline frowned at her. "Silence, please, Sophronia. You may welcome our new student at lunchtime. Now, let's return to our French lesson." As the class continued, Marie Grace struggled to follow along. She found herself recognizing some French words and phrases, but not nearly enough to understand the lesson. She was relieved when Sister Pauline taught the arithmetic lesson in English. "At least I can understand this," Marie Grace thought as she read the problem Sister Pauline wrote on the board. Papa had taught her arithmetic at home, and whenever she went shopping, she had to add and subtract in her head. Now Marie Grace discovered that while the other girls in the class seemed to be struggling, she solved the problems easily. The hardest test came at lunchtime. The rain had stopped, and Marie Grace took the basket that Mrs. Curtis had packed and followed the other girls out to the courtyard. It was a pleasant space, with the view of the gardens and the stables in the back of the convent. There were benches arranged around a fountain, and the girls gathered in tight clusters, talking and laughing. On one bench, girls from the back of the classroom were chattering together in French. Marie Grace did not want to embarrass herself by trying to speak French again, so she continued past them. Lavinia, Sophronia, and 3 other girls from the front rows were sitting together and chatting in English. Marie Grace smiled hopefully at them as she approached the group. But when Lavinia saw Marie Grace, she spread out her skirt so that there was no extra room on the bench. Marie Grace continued walking. On the farthest bench, she found the girl with the curly brown hair whose book she had shared in class. The girl was studying her spelling lesson and eating a biscuit by herself. Marie Grace stopped in front of her. The girl glanced up. "You can sit here if you want," she said with an Irish accent, "but you might not want to." "Why not?" Marie Grace asked. With a bounce of her curls, the girl jerked her head towards Lavinia and her friends. All the rich American girls who live in fancy houses sit over there. Then she gestured toward the other bench. And all the girls from New Orleans sit over there. They talk French so fast that nobody else can understand them. Marie Grace thought for a moment. She wasn't sure that she fit in with either group. Even though she'd been born in New Orleans, she couldn't speak French very well. But she wasn't a rich American who lived in a fancy house either. I guess I'll sit here, she told the curly-haired girl, and settled next to her. Marie Grace learned that the girl's name was Frances, and that she had been at St. Teresa's for only 2 months. Frances's father was a builder, and he and his men were repairing the convent stables. My pa's going to be finished here in a couple of weeks, said Frances. Then our family's leaving New Orleans, and I'll never have to see those rich snobby girls again. She frowned at Lavinia and her friends. I can hardly wait till we move. I never want to move again, Marie Grace thought. She glanced over to the other bench where Lavinia chatted happily with her friends. I'll have to try to get them to like me, she decided. Otherwise, I'll be alone here. During the next week, Marie Grace began to settle into the school routine. She liked Sister Pauline, and except for French, she did well in her classwork. Her favorite subject was arithmetic. When Sister Pauline called on her to solve problems at the blackboard, she almost always got the right answers. But one problem Marie Grace couldn't solve was how to make friends with Lavinia Halsworth. Lavinia boasted about being the best student in the class. She was often the first to raise her hand when Sister Pauline asked a question. On Tuesday, during their geography lesson, Sister Pauline asked what the capital of Pennsylvania was. Lavinia's hand shot up. Philadelphia, she answered. Sister Pauline shook her head, and then she called on Marie Grace. For a moment, Marie Grace hesitated. She knew the answer, but didn't want to seem as if she was showing off. Finally, she mumbled, Harrisburg? Very good, said Sister Pauline, smiling. Lucky guess, Lavinia whispered angrily. Marie Grace tried to sink out of view. At lunchtime, Marie Grace sat with Frances, who usually read a book while she ate. Lavinia always sat in the middle of her front row friends, like a queen surrounded by her admirers. Marie Grace listened to Lavinia talk loudly about her new dresses, the opera she attended, and most of all, the party she was invited to. I have the most wonderful costume for Mardi Gras, Lavinia announced to her friends. You'll never guess what I am going to be. You have to tell us, exclaimed Sophronia. I already told you that I'm going to be an angel. You were an angel last year, Lavinia pointed out. That's nothing special, but nobody's ever had a costume like mine before. The girls begged Lavinia for hints about her costume, but she refused to give any details. It's a secret, she teased. Marie Grace wished she could join the conversation. What is Mardi Gras, she wondered, and why do they need costumes? But whenever Marie Grace tried to talk to the front row girls, either at lunchtime or in the classroom, Lavinia made it clear that she wasn't welcome. On Friday afternoon, however, Marie Grace thought her chance had come. Sister Pauline wrote several problems on the blackboard for the girls to solve, and then she stepped out of the room. Sophronia studied the problems. I don't understand this one at all, she announced, and she read aloud from the board. If Mary has $1 and she goes to the market and buys 2 pounds of flour for 5 cents a pound, how much money will Mary have left? How should I know how much money Mary has? Sophronia wailed, staring at her blank slate. She turned around to Marie Grace. Do you know how to solve it? I think so, said Marie Grace, happy that Sophronia wanted her opinion. You begin by figuring out the total cost of the flour. Lavinia turned and glared at Marie Grace. That's not right, she interrupted. Marie Grace shrank back in her seat. It isn't? No, said Lavinia triumphantly. You begin by sending your maid to do the marketing. Lavinia laughed loudly at her own joke, and the other girls in the front row laughed too. Even Sophronia giggled. Lavinia gave her friend a scornful look. Honestly, Sophie, it's an easy problem, she said, snatching Sophronia's slate away from her. I'll show you how to do it. As Marie Grace bent over her own work, she heard Lavinia whisper to her friends, Some girls think they know everything, but they can't even speak French. All they can say is, oui, oui, oui. The other girls giggled again, and Marie Grace felt her face burn. How will I ever make friends here, she thought with a sinking heart. Every week at school, Marie Grace looked forward to Saturdays. At exactly 10 o'clock in the morning, she and Argos set off for the Royal Music Hall. They walked side by side under the pretty iron balconies that reached out over the banquettes. When they neared Jackson Square, the smell of roasting coffee beans and steamed milk was everywhere. The cafes were full of customers, and the markets were crowded with shoppers. As they walked, Argos kept close to Marie Grace. No matter how busy the streets were, he stayed by her side. He didn't even chase the pigeons when they crossed Jackson Square. Good dog, Marie Grace, as birds fluttered around them. Good dog. Louis, the watchman at the music hall, had become friends with Argos. Louis often saved treats for the big dog, and Argos sat with him by the back entrance while Marie Grace went upstairs to Mademoiselle Oceane's studio. Today, Cecile's lesson ended just as Marie Grace arrived. Marie Grace waited outside the studio until Cecile finished. Cecile rushed out with a big smile and said, Bonjour, comment vas-tu? Then she repeated herself in English. Hello, how are you? Marie Grace smiled and answered in English, I'm very well, thank you. How are you? Then she practiced her French with Cecile, who gently corrected her pronunciation and taught her new words and expressions. I wish the girls at school were as kind as Cecile, Marie Grace thought. All week Marie Grace looked forward to seeing Cecile. The two girls never ran out of things to talk about. Cecile told Marie Grace about her busy household, her lessons with her tutor, and her pet parrot. Marie Grace in turn told Cecile about helping her father in his office, Mrs. Curtis's grumblings about cooking strange New Orleans foods, and Argos's latest adventures. I'm sorry we cannot talk longer, Cecile always said when Ellen came to fetch her. Marie Grace was sorry too. It was time for her own lesson next, though, and it was wonderful to sing with Mademoiselle Oceane. The lesson was fun, but it was also hard work. Marie Grace had to stand up straight, breathe properly, and sing scales, lots and lots of scales. When Mademoiselle introduced a new song, she and Marie Grace would sing it together, going over and over the hard parts. The hour went quickly, and Marie Grace was always surprised when the clock struck 11:30. Bon, good, enough for today, Mademoiselle Oceane would say. Now, Marie Grace, would you like some tea? Yes, please, Marie Grace would reply. She loved talking with Mademoiselle Oceane, and they had become friends outside the studio, too. When Uncle Luke Steamboat had been in New Orleans recently, he had brought Mademoiselle Oceane to the gardener's house for tea. Since Papa and Marie Grace hardly ever had guests, it had been a special occasion. Marie Grace had been allowed to wear her best dress and serve little iced cakes to everyone. Today, Mademoiselle smiled as she poured a cup of steaming hot tea for Marie Grace. I am so happy, she said. Your uncle wrote that he will be back in New Orleans in time for the Mardi Gras balls. Marie Grace put a lump of sugar into her tea. I've heard girls at school talking about Mardi Gras. What is it? Mardi Gras means Fat Tuesday, Mademoiselle explained. We have dances, parties, and wonderful food on Mardi Gras, because it's the last day before the holy season of Lent begins. Then, after the 40 days of Lent, of course, we celebrate Easter. Oh, said Marie Grace, still a bit confused. She remembered how Lavinia had boasted about her secret costume. Does everyone dress in costumes? Mademoiselle nodded. Many people spend weeks planning what they will wear, she said. The balls are very grand events. There are even special balls for children. Really? Exclaimed Marie Grace. She had read about fancy balls in fairy tales. She imagined how exciting it would be to go to one, especially a costume ball. It sounds wonderful. Yes, Mademoiselle agreed. Then she set her teacup down carefully in its saucer. But you need an invitation to attend. Perhaps, though... Mademoiselle's voice trailed off. Marie Grace did not wait for her to continue. She knew that invitations were for girls like Lavinia, who lived in fancy houses and belonged to the best society. Marie Grace shrugged. I would never know what to do at a ball anyway. And I'd never have a costume to wear either. Do not say never, Mademoiselle chided her gently. Mardi Gras is magical. You never know what might happen. Her blue-green eyes sparkled as she pulled a piece of paper from her music book. Now here is your uncle's letter, chérie, she said. He sends his love to you and says he will take us both for a carriage ride when he returns. He is a very nice man, non? No, I mean, yes, Marie Grace agreed. She had a sudden happy thought. Are you and Uncle Luke going to get married? Mademoiselle's cheeks went bright red. It is too soon to talk of such things, she protested. But she was smiling as she put Uncle Luke's letter away.